Welcome.
Good morning.
Welcome to Belgrade Online,
An online ministry of Belgrade Avenue United Methodist Church.
This week is Second Harvest. That means we are looking for your help to bless our community by distributing produce to people in need. If you are available on Monday from about 10:30 a.m. to 1:15 p.m., please come to the Belgrade parking lot here at 325 Sherman in North Mankato around 10:30 on Monday. We hope to see you there. Dress for the weather.
Well, hey, Happy New Year, everyone. Pastor Dan here. Hope everyone had a fantastic holiday season. And the holiday season in the Christian calendar is not over yet, actually, because as of yesterday, it marks the beginning of the season in the church that we call Epiphany. And so when we get to the message, I'll explain it a little bit. But Epiphany is the season that's after Advent and Christmas. And it starts right now, pretty much. It started yesterday and it starts today. And it'll be going for another few weeks. And so this morning, we're going to talk a little bit about what Epiphany can mean to us this year. And it's a little word that I like to call creativity. And so this message is all about starting your 2024 off creatively, something that lives inside all of us. You have divine creativity inside of you. And that's what this message is about this morning on this first Sunday in Epiphany. So hope that you all have a fabulous rest of your weekend and a wonderful week. Stay warm out there and Happy New Year. And we'll see you soon. Grace and peace, y'all. Well, like I said, we've now entered the season that we call Epiphany. And we just come out of Advent, which Advent is all about expectation, and it's about preparation and that kind of an idea. We're preparing to celebrate the coming of Jesus. That's kind of the meaning of that. And then in the church calendar, the actual Christmas season begins with Christmas Day on December 25th. And you all know the famous, 12 Days of Christmas, right? That song? Well, that's based on the church calendar. And yesterday was the 12th day of Christmas, technically. It's January 6th is the day that the church calendar calls Epiphany. And now we've officially entered into the season called Epiphany. It's also called Christmas Tide. Whatever. It's just terminology. But the term Epiphany, the significance of this is it means to reveal. Epiphany means to reveal. And Western churches, in our Western world, the church, this means kind of the coming of the wise men who were Gentiles or pagans, bringing gifts, what they had been blessed with, to offer to the Christ child, which is a fascinating thing to think about. Because in the scriptures, there was such an emphasis placed on one people group. But when Jesus comes, that people group is cracked open into all people. And so the term God's chosen people is humanity under Christ. And the people that are honored in the story of Jesus, in the coming and the revealing of Jesus, the people that are honored are the people that you wouldn't expect to be honored, given the story of the Scriptures. And that's what's beautiful about it. It's a revealing. It's a fascinating story. And it's definitely not the way that a God in that time and place, if people were going to write a story, like a fake story about a God, and they really wanted to persuade people to believe in that God, that's not the way they would write it. Because it would have been scandalous back then. It doesn't have that much meaning today because we're not in that context. We didn't get it. But to them, hearing a story of a God who's born, a Messiah coming, which Messiah was a political term, this political deliverer coming, and everybody who's honored in his story are the people who they're supposed to be against. It's fascinating. I love it. It's a subversive story. And Epiphany is about that revealing. It's the revealing of Jesus into the world. It's a message of faith in a divine light. Literally the light of the world coming into it. Now, the light of the world has come. Now we got to deal with that light. Because when light comes, it can be uncomfortable, actually. It's fun to sing about, and it's great to get into the Christmas spirit and write it on our Christmas cards and put it on our signs and everything, the light of the world, everything. But when light comes, it can be scary because it exposes things in us that we might not want exposed. But that doesn't have to be a shameful thing. This can also be an exciting thing because when light comes, it lights our path forward and it gives us a vision for the future. It illuminates or reveals a way forward. So it doesn't need to be a shameful thing. It can be an exciting thing. And so Epiphany is about a revealing, this divine light. And so as I was kind of praying and thinking about what to talk about in January this year, kind of the question that I asked myself is, what word of divine light is God speaking to us at the beginning of 2024? And so for our first church service of 2024, I thought I'd begin the year with the beginning of the Scriptures. So let's check out Genesis chapter 1 and verse 1. We'll put that up on the screen. And here's our scripture. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and He separated the light from the darkness. And He called the light day, and the darkness He called night, and there was evening, and there was morning, the first day. And God said, "Let there be a vault between the waters to separate water from water." And so God made the vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it, and it was so. And God called the vault sky, and there was evening, and there was morning, the second day. And so this is the word of the Lord for the people of God. We all said, thanks be to God. Now, the terminology that's used in this scripture is obviously, can get clunky because of many different things. But what this is basically saying is, here's a God who speaks things into existence. And He's creating things. And you've heard me say this many times, that this passage kicks off our scriptures, and it begins with a strong declaration of who God is, who our God is, who the God that we claim to worship is, who the God that we attempt to follow is, the God that we attempt to mimic in our life, who this God is, the God's image that we're all patterned after, this God's character. It's a declaration of who this God is and who you are. It's so strong that we usually miss it. We read right over it because we've heard it 1,000 times and we miss it. And it's right there. Let's put it back up. Verse 1, chapter 1, verse 1, that very first one. In the beginning, say it with me, God created the heavens and the earth. In the beginning, God, what's the next word? Created. One of the first things we're told about our God's nature, our God's character, is creativity. It's creativity. And this creativity of God is displayed in plain sight everywhere in creation. But we miss it. We miss it. And as humans, we tend to complicate things. We tend to miss the things that are kind of staring straight at us. But God's creative. And this divine light that we celebrate in Epiphany, this divine light that has been gifted to us. It's kind of like the stars in the sky, There's a scripture that talks about that the heavens declare the glory of God. The stars worship, But the stars display their worship simply by doing what they're created to do. And you think about the wise men who came, and they worshiped Jesus simply by bringing the gifts that they were given to Jesus. So there's something about just being who you were created to be and offering what you've been blessed with, and whatever that is, that equals worship. And how we do that creatively is where the magic is. We worship by exercising this divine creativity and gifting it to the world in some way. See, this is where tradition can harm our message sometimes, because traditionally we think that we've given these little boxes, and this is how you worship God, this is how you give offerings to God, this is how you exist as a Christian in this life, this is what you can do, these are the only spiritual practices you can do. There's these boxes that we think we have to fit in. But the scriptures tell a completely different story. See, you can worship God simply by letting that divine mojo that you've been gifted, tapping into that and letting that flow, figuring out what the need of the world is and finding some way of meeting that creatively. I could stand up here and beat everybody over the head and say the scriptures say we need to be kind and we need to do things for people. So we're going to take an offering right now and you all better give so that we can give to some orphans overseas to have water. We could have said that, but we didn't do that because that's not the Spirit of God. That's not how the Spirit of God works. But instead, one person and then another person and another person got this idea to all band together and pool resources and give money to overseas to charity water and save some lives. And instead, it inspired us. And there's a way to do things that are life-sucking and a way to do things that are life-giving. And the difference is divine creativity. We exercise by gifting this divine creativity that is inside of you, every single one of you. Whether you realize it or not, it's there. And gifting it to the world in some way. And I'm talking about creativity in everything we do. It's so natural to us that we don't even think we're being creative when we actually are. There's been so many people that I know of personally, so many friends that I talk to, that they're so creative, and I talk to them about it, and I'm like, that's not creative, that's just this and that and that. And they don't see it. I'm like, that's incredibly creative, And there's things in my life that I'm like, I'm the most boring person in the world, and people are like, look, you do this, and this, it's so creative. I'm like, it's just something I do because this or that, whatever. No, see, we miss our own creativity so many times because it seems normal to us. But that's the thing. That's what's so beautiful about it. It's normal because it's a part of you. You all are creative, and you have creativity within you. It's oozing out of us. Our world is drenched with it. It's everywhere. And the things that God has given us that are so powerful, we miss it because they're so natural. And it's a beautiful thing. Now, when I talk about creativity, here's what I'm not talking about. When we think of the word, usually what pops in our mind is, an ethereal artist. Let's all share our emotions and feel together, and like a flower child kind of stuff from the 60s, whatever. And so to illustrate what I mean by God's divine creativity, let's look at an ethereal art movie from the 60s. That's a joke. Anyways, but we really are going to do that. I tried to be, every year, once Christmas Eve is over, I always joke that once I say amen on Christmas Eve, I start 2 weeks off. And I take the end of the year off and the beginning of the year off a little bit, just to kind of rest and recoup and recalibrate. And I always try to be intentional, especially this year. So the past 2 weeks, I just was back in the office now on Friday, and over the past 2 weeks, I tried to be intentional about resting. It doesn't always go as planned, of course, but one thing I wanted to do in my resting is, because I love movies and stuff, I wanted to watch a few classics that I'd never seen before. And one of those movies was 2001: A Space Odyssey. And how many of you have ever seen that movie? How many of you have ever understood that movie? All hands went down. Now, there's a short clip that I'm going to show you from that movie. It's just a little over a minute. I edited it a little bit for sake of time. Just a short little clip, and I'm not going to set it up or anything. I just want to show that to you right now, and then we'll talk about it afterwards. So let's go ahead and show a little clip from 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, if you've ever seen this movie, you know that right after this little part, right after these specific images, it leads to the most confusing part of the whole film. And whenever I watch a movie like this, I can't just turn it off and walk away and think about it. I'll do that a little bit, but then I got to go find interviews by the director and the actors and try to figure out what it's about. And I figured out what it's. I found the director of this movie is Stanley Kubrick, and I found an interview by him on what this is all about, and it's actually brilliant and fascinating. But this scene illustrates what we're talking about this morning in creativity in a couple ways. And here's why I show this. Number one is this movie was made. You all saw those images now. This movie was made. Began filming somewhere between 1965 and 1966. It was filmed all through 1967 and edited, and it was released in 1968. There was no CGI. So what you just saw, there was no computers involved in that. I mean, it was digitally remastered, but that was the same images you would have seen if you would have seen the movie in a cinema theater in 1968. So how in the world did he do that if there was no computer animation? Like I said, that Stanley Kubrick is the guy that directed this, and depending on who you ask, he was either a genius or a madman, but you can't ignore that he was a master filmmaker in many ways. However, I wouldn't recommend you go out and watch all of his films because they can be pretty disturbing. But he had this vision of this movie and of this part of this movie and had to figure out how to do it, how to get it out. And so what he ended up doing, without getting too technical about it, there's a specific discipline or technique that was used in processing film and different things. It was used for other things, but he saw this technique and said, I could use that to create these images. And there's this other technique over here, I can use that to do this. And he took a couple different streams and put them together and figured out a way to create those images. Decades before computer animation was a thing. None of those were animated either. That was all done chemically and in camera. Fascinating kind of stuff. So he took these techniques from different disciplines and he put them all together in a different way to create that gorgeous scene of what outer space might look like. That's creativity. It's creativity. And here's how that, you say, well, when am I going to do anything like that in my life? That's not the point. Here's the point. It's creativity. And creativity is resourceful. There's nothing about creativity that makes things up from nothing. We don't have the power to create from nothing. Creativity to us, to humanity, is when we see one thing and make this crazy connection with another thing over there, put them together, and add a different meaning and a spin on it and have a different creation. All we can do is make connections and mix things together, inject meaning to it, and make it beautiful. That's all creativity is. The science of creativity, the study of creativity, the practice of it all. It's literally just saying, what about that over there? What about this over there? And that over there? That one part of this can work with that little part over there, and we can do boom, look at this, it's gorgeous. It works, Or maybe it's not gorgeous, maybe it's ugly as sin, but it works, It's effective. Whatever you want to see. It's resourceful. Creativity is just about making connections that wouldn't normally be there. It's resourceful. So that's the first thing that this reminds me of. But the second thing that this reminded me of when I watched it over break was that I see this scene, and this is supposed to be kind of like outer space. And technically, if you listen to interviews, those images aren't like planets or outer space. Those images represent alien life forms that don't have form or shape. They're just sort of colors. That's what they're supposed to represent. But the point is that I look at those images, and it's one aspect of what outer space could look like. And there's some aspects of outer space that don't look too different from that, because we have images, that we've seen that are pretty far away that kind of look, reminiscent of some of those things. But outer space images, if you close your eyes real tight for a while, that's kind of what the back of your eyelids start to look like after a while too. It's like if you close your eyes real tight, you get your eyes do all these swirls and light morphs and different things, all these images. Have you ever done that before? And so you've got these images that are kind of like how our eyes process light and how our brain images work, and neural pathways spitting out information and decoding information from the back of our eyelids, yet also outer space. So like the most grandiose parts of the universe plus the most intricate parts of our own being somehow are all connected. And it reminds me of how, there's the bigness of God's creation, His creativity, is powerful, but the tiny small parts of God's creation and His creativity inside of us, neurons and synapses and atoms, protons, electrons, cells, everything, it's all absolutely creatively fascinating and powerful. There's the bigness and the smallness, the macro and the micro of God. It's all connected by the absolute masterful creativity of our God. And so, what can we take away from all of that? What do we take away from this message about creativity, divine light, and epiphany? What do we take away? Well, here's practicality. Here's the basics. Here's it. Life, everything we do, is about decisions and solving problems. Making decisions and solving problems. Life, creativity doesn't need to be just about ethereal art. It absolutely is, and it can be, but creativity can absolutely exist on how we make decisions and solve problems in our everyday life. What am I going to have for supper? How am I going to make supper? What am I going to eat? I got to go to the grocery store. I got to do the dishes. How am I going to get this done at work? How am I going to self-improvement? How am I going to grow? I need to grow past this point. I need to do some more inner work to get past this thing, to process this trauma. How we get creativity. It takes creativity. It takes coming up with ideas. For whatever reason, there's something about us that tries to dismiss things that seem silly. But usually the silly things are dismissed because they're so simple, not because they're ridiculous. And I've found that when you get the silly thoughts, that might make, that's funny, now what's the real answer? If you stop backtrack and go, no, that is the real answer. I am going to do that ridiculous thing. Most of the time, that's the doorway forward in whatever it is in your life. From how am I going to heal past this moment to how am I ever going to move on? How am I going to exist without X, Y, and Z? How can I finally get that thing that I've been working towards? How am I going to pay my next bills? How am I going to whatever? Usually it's the ridiculous, silly thing that's the way forward. But we dismiss it. The best things in my life that I've ever done are the ridiculous things. Those are the things that have made the most impact. Those are the things that have stuck out in other people's minds the most. And those are also the things that have seemed the most insignificant and dumb to me. If you listen to interviews of musicians or directors or whatever, they'll tell you that, I don't know why that movie that I made was so popular, but that's the popular one. Or musicians, I don't know why that song was the hit off the album. It was the least interesting song to me of the whole album. It's usually the things that seem the most ridiculous to us that can be the most creative, that can be the most powerful. And it's usually those things where the voice of God is the most effervescent. Creativity exists inside of you, but you don't realize it because it's so normal to you. That's how intertwined with the nature of God all of us are. And the big epiphany, the big revealing is that Jesus came to dwell with us in our everyday lives. That's not just a cute thing for the holidays. God really came down to live with us. God really lives inside of you. You really have divine creativity in you. You really have the power to inspire yourself and to inspire others. It just is so normal that many times we dismiss it. So if there's anything I can get across to you this morning, is you have divine power in the form of creativity inside of you. You know, I'll end with this story. I always find, funny things on Facebook, and sometimes they're posted by people I know, and sometimes they're not. And I thought this was funny because all of our beloved dad joke connoisseur Scott Morrison posted this on Facebook the other day, and I thought this was hilarious. He said, "No matter what your job, you should always try and make it interesting." Guillotine with the bowling pins at the end of the sliding bowling pins. Getting creative. But for real. Last week, here's the story that I'm getting at. Last week, Christmas vacation, there's a couple days when I just kind of made myself for a few hours in the morning, just kind of sit and look out the window or watch something or do something, whatever. And one of the days, Charlie comes up, and my son Charlie, my 7-year-old, comes up and sits by me, and I'm always getting on our kids because, they're kids and they're messy, and Charlie will grab a couple bags of these little mini bags of fruit snacks, and he'll eat them, and then he'll ditch the wrappers on the table and completely forget about it and go on his day. And so I'll find these little pockets of wrappers everywhere. So I told him, I said, "Charlie, I'm always on his case about hanging up his bag and cleaning up his wrappers and all this stuff." And he's the other day I'm sitting on the couch, and he comes down and sits by me, and he starts to eat his fruit snacks. And I kind of look up at him, and I look down at the wrapper, and he kind of puts his tablet down, and he walks out of the room. And I was like, I wonder what that's about, And so he comes down, and he sits on the couch again. And I'll show you the next picture there. So he's sitting there, and he sits on the couch, and he's eating his fruit snacks. Now, in case you don't notice what's behind him there, go to the next photo. He brought a garbage can from his room down and sets it right next to him. So that, next picture, he can just toss his wrapper away when he's done. I said, "Buddy, you could have just walked the wrappers to the garbage can." He's like, "Well, this way, I just bring the can up back to my room when I'm done. Don't even have to go to the garbage can." It's like, creativity. It's silly and ridiculous, but it made it into the sermon. So, and that's all I want to get across, is that as we start 2024 and we go into this season of Epiphany, I just want you to remember that God's divine light is in you. And sometimes the silliest things, the ideas that you have or the thoughts that you think are the silliest, sometimes that's God's voice speaking to you. Let's stand.
Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, save that thou art. Thou my best thought, by day or by night, waking or sleeping, thy presence my light. Be thou my wisdom, and thou my true word. I ever with thee, and thou with me, Lord. Thou and thou only, first in my heart. Great God of heaven, my treasure thou art. Great God of heaven, my victory won. May I reach heaven's joys, O bright heaven's sun. Heart of my own heart, whatever befall, still be my vision, O ruler of all. Still be my vision, O ruler of all.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Belgrade Online. If it was life-giving and encouraging to you, please let us know by visiting our giving page at baumc.org/give. Thanks again for watching and have a blessed week.